And Fred VanNatta, my relationship to the housing industry commenced in the late 60s. I graduated at Oregon University in political science and went back to the farm and figured out I couldn't make a living, so I enrolled in the University of Oregon for another degree in political science. And at the conclusion of that, I had an opportunity to work in the Oregon legislature, and I was assistant to the Speaker of the House in the 65 and 67 sessions of the Oregon legislature, but I figured out that a staff member for the Speaker of the House, she didn't make much money, so I worked the countryside and found that the home builders were looking for a lobbyist, and I, starting in the 69 session, became a registered lobbyist for the Homebuilders Association, and housing obviously would be the subject we would look at. We had local home builders associations in the major cities of Oregon, and they combined to create the State Homebuilders Association, of which I was the director and the lobbyist for. Is that,
yeah, that covers it.
Is that more than you need to know?
No, well, that at least starts us. So go ahead and, in terms of your experience with Goal 10, Oregon's land use system, and then Goal 10, which was housing, what were the motivations by different individuals to even put a new goal called housing into place? What were the alliances? What were the objections?
I think that the key was Senate Bill 10, not more aptly, I think, described as a piece of legislation, and it was Senate Bill 10, which was drafted by people who were concerned about the loss of farmland to residential construction. Senate Bill 10 was not well drafted by the person who generated it, if my memory is correct, was a farmer legislator who was a much better farmer than he was at drafting bills, but he wanted to do something to protect the farmland, and he drafted Senate Bill 10, which was later worked over some to be what its current form is if you research it. And it didn't have any, in my mind anyway at the time, it didn't have any real planning regulations or things in it. It was a floater and laid the groundwork. As people got to thinking about it, they said, let's build on Senate Bill 10, and that resulted in Senate Bill 100, which had a great deal of detail and regulatory provisions in its contents. And so my impression is that Senate Bill 10 was a flyer by people who hadn't figured out what you needed to put in it to really make any difference, because I don't think Senate Bill 10 changed conduct much, except it excited people to get behind a regulatory, a set of regulations that would limit the places that housing could take over farmland.
So how did that evolve Senate Bill 100 into obviously a series of goals, and then later, after those original goals were articulated, there became Goal 10, which was the housing goal? Could you kind of walk us through that?
I'm not sure I can walk you very far. People got excited. The liberal community, the regulatory community, if that's a descriptive frame to you, got excited about, we can get some regulations and we can limit where people build and how much they build, or if they build at all. And they became activists that drafted Senate Bill 100, which had a lot of specific provisions in it, and gave everybody who wanted to regulate the world a chance to fiddle with the process. And that is kind of my impression of it. In terms of what the Homebuilders Association thought about it, the local and downstate associations were not sympathetic to Senate Bill 100. The Portland Association didn't say much one way or the other. They didn't have the reservations about Senate Bill 100 that the smaller and rural communities had. And with that as a comment, let me read a document that a friend of mine gave me when I told him I was going to come up here and visit with those Portland liberals. We'll identify him for you shortly, but let me read the sentence or two. 1973, prior to the land use laws, a nice home could be had for $25,000 to $30,000. The same home today is $300,000 to $400,000. A fully developed lot could be had for $3,000 to $6,000. Today, those lots are $80,000. A building permit was a couple $100. Today, it's $22,000. The land use laws and their attendant rules and regulations brought about that sorry state of affairs. Building codes have added lots of additional costs as well, but nothing like the land use mess. And you would guess that it was Eric Moyer who wrote that, and he is the author of that. And it had been my plan to start the meeting with that discussion, but you know all this stuff already, so I'm not telling you anything new.
But I should share with you, in terms of your role, to the individual, when we talk with other interviewees, including your predecessor here this morning, Bob Stacy, your name is the inspiration around Goal 10 housing. It was used, the way it has been described is, if we're going to have a conservation ordinance,
Yeah, see,
we ought to have.
Goal 10 is different than Senate Bill 10 and Senate
Right,
Bill 100.
no, I understand. So that's what this discussion is about, is Goal 10. So, your involvement, inspiration around it, and I'm trying to share how other people think of you in this context, is if we're going to have this land conservation series of regulations or whatever, but it's called land conservation and development, where is the development piece? And clearly the development piece that's of interest to Fred VanNatta was housing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So your comments about how that evolved and came to be, because it wasn't in the original 19 goals. Goal 10 was adopted 2 years later. And so your thoughts and reflections. How did it come about, and who did you talk with? And
recognizing that this was over 50 years ago,
albeit that's the reason we're doing this.
They were had a series of special projects. They were special things they were talking about, and I joined the party and said, housing is very important to people, and if you've got all these opportunities to say no, but there's nothing that says that we ought to be helping housing, because and of course helping the opportunity to build housing for people. And they squiggled and wiggled a little bit, but finally decided that made some sense, and we would set forth some housing regulations. I later complemented it with a bill that required, when they redid their plan, when the municipalities redid their plan, they would provide 20 acres for housing, and that has never been implemented. One of our local associations, one in Eastern Oregon, they tried to sue the city because there were no apartments available, and nobody could build them because there wasn't any land. And the association, I gave them a lecture on what the law said, and so, well, we'll go take care of that. And the net result was the association spent $250,000 for legal fees and got nothing. And I've not studied that, what the judges said about it, but they got their case tossed out.
Do you remember the case, or who the attorney was, or anything?
I don't. I can get you the name of the staff guy for the association over there, who is also a state senator.
And when was this case? Do you remember?
Pardon?
Do you remember when this case was?
Oh, no, no, but he can,
Tell us.
he can tell you, he works for the
Central Oregon
for the
Association.
Central Oregon Association. And I'll think of his name I'll think of his name in a minute.
It wasn't Al Johnson, was it?
No,
Okay.
no, I will get it for you.
Did they prevail?
No, they lost, and it cost him $250,000. And I have never been inspired to go study the case and figure out all of that, but that might be something that you'd be very interested in doing.
Yes.
I will get you his name and phone number, and he still works for the association, for the local association. I got him his case, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, when people were complaining about no rental apartments in Bend, and told him I got this bill passed. Well, next time I talked to him about it, he says, yeah, you got $250,000 out of our association and nothing else.
So back in the 70s, the homebuilders obviously worked on Goal 10. I mean, you were part of the, well, not Senate Bill 10, but Goal 10 that's related to housing. Did you have an alliance you worked with? Did you work with cities? Do you recall any of that kind of dialogue back then? What people liked, what they didn't like? It's pretty aspirational, the goal itself.
I don't think that we had any strong allies politically, but the government regulatory folks didn't kick up a fuss about it. There was not a lot of opposition either, because people understood quickly that housing housing is important, and we should not shut down completely. We try to keep them from building on farmland, but they still ought to be able to provide homes for people.
So, a couple of the interviewees raised the issue about Henry Richmond's support of Goal 10 and how he felt that it was a very important attribute to the planning system, and if you didn't include housing, there was going to be a real pushback against the regulation as well as the vision of Senate Bill 100. Do you recall any of that? Did you work with Henry, or did you?
I never felt that housing was put on the list because I had the ability to kill all their ideas. Maybe it was, but my impression was that people understood that housing was important.
So, as you watched this, you served as executive director of the Home Builders till when?
Until '05.
Okay. So between early 70s and 2005, a lot had happened. There had been the early recession in 2000. There had been the Volcker period in the early 80s where interest rates went up. Do you feel that Goal 10 in plans was there any enforcement of Goal 10? Was there any, how was Goal 10 handled by DLCD and or cities? Was it by and large ignored? Was there capacity because of these recessions that they didn't have to address it? How do you think the acknowledged plans kind of addressed Goal 10 over time?
I don't think Goal 10 had, or Senate Bill 10, and I'm not.
No, Goal 10 is the one we're talking about, the housing goal.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got off track there. When not much is going on, why people aren't mad about the erosion of farmland and all of those, when the housing industry is in the tank, nobody has money to buy housing, nobody's out making money, and if nobody's out making money, why there aren't a lot of houses built, and if there aren't a lot of houses built, why the no-growthers don't have a lot to attack. So you just hope that the economy recovers sometime down the road. That's not a very good answer, but it's an honest observation.
Well, so what we're trying to understand here is, does the housing goal specifically add to the benefit of the citizens of Oregon by ensuring there's an availability of land for rental, for single family? Does it functionally do what it says it's supposed to encourage? Doesn't mandate it, but it does say all acknowledged plan and state agency programs are encouraged to ensure that there's an availability of adequate numbers of housing units at price range and rent levels which are commensurate with the financial capabilities of Oregon households. So how do people respond to that? I mean, the local governments are encouraged to make sure that there's a land supply for apartments, for manufactured or mobile homes, for single family attached, and that it's adequate and that it's oriented in such a way that both the for sale and the rent are able to commensurately meet housing needs of Oregon families. Is that a success story? Has it added anything, or has it detracted?
Well,
in your opinion,
it is interesting to me to listen to Salem's current mayor, and to some extent the discussion in Portland about housing for the people who were living under the bridge in sleeping by the furnace next to the YMCA and other people without houses, period. I don't see anybody talking about or saying we got to do this because of Goal 10. I think that Portland or Salem's current mayor, who's very interested in building housing, getting housing for the unhoused, and I've read some stuff in the paper that in Portland why they're talking about it as well. I doubt if our current mayor, who was an ex-legislator, knows anything about Goal 10, and he isn't motivated by it. He's motivated by, and people in Portland are motivated by a tent city and not by any, in my mind anyway, any statutory regulation or statute. And that's my observation on they didn't go read the book and say, gee, we better go do this, and neither did their predecessors who didn't care about whether they housed everybody or not.
So going then, and I hate to take you forward and back, but then going back to the inspiration of it, what was it seen as a countermeasure to something else you talked about? Making sure that houses didn't creep into the agricultural land supply, if you will. Why did it develop? How did it come about? What was the rationale for it? Why wasn't there? Was there a fear that if they focused on Goal 10, that it then would go gobble up farmland, or just was it a nice set of words?
Well, I think there was a concern that Goal 10 would give the system an erosion, an opportunity to erode farmland, which didn't cause me any grief. But when they tried to weigh everything, they left Goal 10, they left housing in one of the goals, even if it might when you weighed the politics of it, the easiest thing to do was give the home builders the housing goal, and we don't think it'll hurt things too much because the planners are going to still run everything anyway. Or that was
your perception at that time.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that Goal 10 has assisted in providing for the flexibility of housing types? Do you think it's encouraged? I mean, you mentioned the bend rule, which kind of is an indicator that it hasn't helped address types of housing. But in other locations, do you think it's helped increase the possibility for other types of housing rather than just single family, or not? And why?
Well, I'm not able to answer. I have no data on that subject. And I understand the question. I'm just not able to give a thoughtful answer because I have not talked to, I don't know, and I'm sorry that one of your professors isn't here to hear this comment, but I have a long time since I got involved in Oregon politics, thought Portland should be detached and applied to the state of Washington. And its treatment of housing here continues to convince me of that.
So, in your reading the paper, you know there are a lot of articles about we're in a current housing crisis, okay? Do you think this is new? Is it something that's been around for a while? Do you think the basic attributes of this have not been addressed, or nobody's thought about it, or they see it as a cyclical economic cycle and don't understand it as a housing crisis? This is kind of new language in the media.
Well, I think that the Portland people that are talking about let's house our homeless see that not as a housing is incidental to that. They see their people sleeping in tents next to the sidewalk, and that we ought to do something about that. And coincidentally, housing is what you have to do. So they get to the housing issue as a result of their belief that people ought to live better than having to sleep under the bridge or sleep in a tent on the lawn. And interesting in Salem, because we have some nonprofits that provide a lot of housing for people. Our current mayor has asked for a reading on each person living out, a medical, try to find out how much of it is mental health and how much of it is being poor and how much of it's because they're alcoholics, and he's classified all the unsheltered that they're able to track down and talk to. They've got them all identified and some data about why they're there, and then he's going to worry about the kind of housing he builds and where they build it, which in Salem is going to be an interesting, and I think it will be the same in other cities if they get serious about housing the unhoused.
Well, okay, so there are actually here at the university we're starting to learn, and none of this is completely documented yet, so yeah, I'm kind of being on the surface of this, but there are senior populations that are living effectively with different members of their family, kind of from 1 month to the next or such like this. They move around, they're relatively mobile. They are housed in that they're in a house, but they've given up their house because their Social Security benefits aren't able to keep up with that cost of housing. And you, in the paragraph that you read at the onset, was my presumption was intended to show significant cost increases to housing.
Caused by land shortage as a result of
Well, you also mentioned
regulatory.
but you also mentioned building codes and
Yeah.
lack of infrastructure, systems development charges, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, as it relates to housing cost issues, do you think Goal 10 has addressed anything as it relates to housing costs? I mean, the language says which is commensurate with the financial capabilities of Oregonians, I guess housing cost isn't an issue if everybody's income just continues to go up and up and up and up. They can pay for the additional costs. But if people's incomes, whatever, because of the job market, the way mills have been shut down, the loss of different manufacturing jobs in the state, and particularly the state and rural areas, has Goal 10 done anything to recognize the burden of cost as a constraint on being able to deliver housing for, quote, its citizens?
Look through the window across the alley over there.
Yeah.
I'm distracted. I don't think that Goal 10 is viewed by folks at all. The lack of housing opportunity construction I don't see them. I don't see people starting from Goal 10 as here's how we need to do this. There is, I believe, and this is based to a considerable extent on an observation about Salem. The planners don't like to make decisions. They delay and they delay and they delay, and I'm sure they're spending their time reading all those regulations and wondering, can I do this or can't I do that, or because people getting advice, what I hear from Salem, and I don't hear things from around the state anymore, everything is delayed. Everything takes weeks to read through and see, can we do this that this builder wants to do? And I suspect that Goal 10 is one of the things they read every time somebody comes in with a plan. But I don't know that. That's speculation.
Well, the other side of that, and I don't know how, let me go there first. The other side of that is maybe Goal 10 isn't even read, and maybe there's all this other stuff that is in play, development ordinances, all of these kinds of things, trying to address environmental issues, neighborhood questions about who's going to be living in my neighborhood. Maybe the regulatory format is all about that, and that there isn't a regulatory format in Goal 10, there's this aspiration. So the question is,
maybe you need to get the phone numbers of a bunch of planning directors and call them and ask them, because I don't talk to planning directors and they don't talk to me.
Well, actually, we're
I
at 2:30, at 2:30 today, I'm interviewing a planning director. But, but let me carry forward on that thought for a moment. If you were king for a day, Fred, but you still had to live in the culture of what you've called a very severe regulatory environment, is a manner that, could you write a piece or an amendment or do something, refine Goal 10 in a language that would catalyze more housing production, that would catalyze or inspire other people to produce more housing for underserved populations? And let me give you an example of that. Many years ago in our relationship, you had an inspirational idea to require a housing cost analysis or a housing impact analysis on any legislation that came out of the Oregon legislature related to housing. So if it had a related clause to housing and or development, there had to be nothing that would say you couldn't do it. It just required a analysis so people understood the impact of what that piece of legislation did. So they could kind of put it in their hierarchy of values and better understand the impact. So you have said, if I've heard you right, that housing, as from Goal 10, was pretty easy to pass. It wasn't something that had a lot of opposition because it made people feel good and that they recognized housing was important. And they also didn't, if I understood you correctly, you didn't feel that they felt that it would put a constraint on preserving or protecting agricultural and or forest lands. In other words, they would continue to be protected. So what would you do? What kind of things would you do as an experienced bill writer, as somebody that could create a regulatory format that would say housing is such that we ought not to allow these crises to occur? But understanding that we still have Senate Bill 100. I mean, this is without repealing Senate Bill 100. You have to live in the context of that. What would you do to Goal 10 to help add to it so that it address some of these things that you've just talked about? Where you say it's not important, it's not listened to, it's not looked at, it hasn't really added anything. Got any ideas?
Well, that I think is best served by a future memorandum, because I don't think I think that fast. The question that one raises, if I understand the question, does our land use regulatory system today affect the cost of housing or the existence of housing? Is that the question that you
I think it's the inverse of that I'm trying to ask is, we have Goal 10.
Yeah.
And when you, if I understand the history correctly, when you were the inspiration behind Goal 10 as somewhat of a countermeasure or to bring balance to the preservation of agricultural land, not to say that agricultural land didn't have value, but how do you balance it with the needs for housing? That's what I understood you were the inspiration for. And if you've said, and I'm not trying to put you in the defense, I'm trying to literally thoroughly understand. If you said, okay, we have this, but we've gone on 40 years now, 45 years with Goal 10, and you've said, well, it really hasn't made a difference. And I think if Betty Niven were still alive, she might feel the same way. There are other that we've already interviewed that have kind of raised that Goal 10 has not received its recognition maybe, or that it hasn't been utilized in the way that it should have been utilized, and there's more it could do. So what would you do? I mean, what if you were if you were in your old role and you said, okay, we've got it, Senate Bill 100, we've got 19 goals, there's this housing goal, and it's not getting the attention, and we've got these people that are underserved, not just the homeless, but other populations that we aren't able to build housing at rent levels commensurate with their incomes today. We can't build it. We've got some that's already out there, but we can't replace it or add to it or add to the stock, and we've got this migration of people coming into the state, and it's still continuing to grow. How do we make sure that there is this balance?
Well,
how's that? And so you get to write a regulation that actually tries to find that balance.
One of the, probably the first thing that would go on the list would be systems development charges. Let us ban them, prohibit them, let us hang people who support them. That would be a step. That would be a step in the direction to make housing more available to people, because it would reduce their cost.
So, no, I can understand that, and as you know, in our long-term relationship, I try to be provocative in that. So, if there's no systems development charges, where does the money for the sewer come from, or the water line that needs to be extended,
Well,
or rebuilt in the case of...
I get a water bill very religiously every month, sent to my wife, and if the water bill isn't back within 2 days or 3 days, they send a second letter and just irritates the socks off of her. And she wants me to go complain to the mayor and chew on the water district, and they send the water bill out about 2 weeks before the end of the month. And if they haven't received it back, why, they send out a second letter, which irritates her. But the water bill is there, and you can add things to it. And of course, she's signing the bill all the time, and they added outdoor lights to the bill, which to me made a lot of sense, because it was something that taxpayers ought to pay for, and trying to set up a second list of taxpayers, we got people on the water bill, so you add it to the water bill, and I catch hell about it. I feel adding it to the water bill makes sense, and if we need money for a sewer system, add it to the water bill.
Okay. So,
And hope you're not married to a woman like I am.
So, a couple of last questions because of our time. I just want to kind of pursue you have experience in listening, watching, hearing from developers in rural Oregon, smaller cities and such. And Goal 10 obviously applies just as much as it does to Elgin, Oregon as it does to Portland. A little different set of rules with the metro housing rule and the like, but still. So, in our work here at the university, we find that there are housing shortages in Ashland, in Klamath Falls, in Bend,
Well,
and people in Bend, as an example, are commuting from Prineville and Redmond. Agricultural communities live quite often, many members of the agricultural community that serve the Hood River fruit industry are commuting from Madras. This is all an indicator, and and of course, obviously, there's tourism that is impacting.
A very large number of millennials live in Salem and drive to Portland every day for their jobs. And the people that were out doing door-to-door housing, doing door-to-door politicking in this last year have come back amazed at the number of people that live in kind of North Salem and come to drive to Portland for their job.
So this is a phenomenon statewide.
Yeah.
It's not a phenomenon. Is there something that's not being addressed in Goal 10 as it relates to that? We have a transportation goal. We have
I'm not confident. I have no data. On that. Maybe the other question is, are the planning directors the evil, worthless, not working very hard, delaying folks? Are they using Goal 10 to prevent the construction of housing? I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know, I'm a fisherman now, and I'm not following all that stuff.
Well,
I don't even go fishing.
but you ought to be thanked for the inspiration of Goal 10. I mean, it's not, it clearly is creating a conundrum in that it's in place, it is statutory. It even has a metropolitan housing rule that says that we want to make sure that there's enough different types of housing, particularly multifamily and or attached housing in metropolitan communities. It doesn't necessarily say that that can't be for home ownership, just in a different model. But clearly, and we've also, as developers, and I being one, have learned that we can actually build at higher densities because of market preferences now than where the market was maybe in the early 70s and the like. So we've experienced kind of that morphing, if you will, of the market. But the frustration that is here, Fred, is that we have this goal that specifically talks about making sure that we have the availability of adequate numbers of housing units at price ranges and rent levels which are commensurate with the financial capabilities of Oregon households. And there seems to be some form of disconnect that is occurring here in the marketplace as it relates to that. We have tried to make sure that there's zone land, okay? And there are knowledge plans that say, oh, you can refill and you can redevelop this at a higher density, but it's not happening. That the market for something is not reacting in such a way. And I'm not trying to lead you. I have done some thinking on this, and it's not my role, but I'm going to toss a couple of things out. the lack of integration of tax policy with land use policy. Do we encourage people to land bank rather than develop land inside the metropolitan areas because ballot measure 5 keeps their property tax holding costs down low over time? High cost of capital gains tax on people, particularly in Oregon where there's no differential for capital gain investment on sale. Actually, people say, why should I sell when this is an asset? It's kind of like a gold mine sitting out there. If gold's going up high, do I want to extract the gold now, or do I want to extract the gold at a later date? So if we don't extract the gold or put the land into the marketplace, but we've identified this as a place that could actually meet needs, is there something in the system that Goal 10 could do to encourage kind of a re-evaluation of that? Now that's a very leading question, and I understand that. But the frustration here is we know we've got an underhoused state. That is fact. We know we have an immigration and the policy that's, a livability, and people see this as a place to come to avoid some of the things that they don't like about other places. So we know that. What we don't yet have an idea on is why the things that we have, maybe the 19 goals are adding to the value of our state in terms of retaining certain things, but there's one of those goals called housing that is not getting addressed. I mean, it's not happening the way that the writers were inspired to write it. It's not addressing. You can have land available, hypothetically, identified for conversion and redevelopment and those kinds of things. But if you've still got a lot of people underserved in housing, are you making available adequate number of housing units at price ranges and rent levels which are commensurate with the financial capabilities of Oregon citizens?
Well,
something's missing.
Something missing is a realistic statement there that recognizes we're not going to build housing when the water bill is too much, the electric bill is too much, the land costs too much. We're not going to build housing like that suggests, and it's entirely possible and probable that we weren't doing it in 1970s either, but there's a certain amount of fluff in that phrase that you use.
Continue to use.
Yeah, which you continue to use because it's an unrealistic dream.
Well, personally, and I don't know if this should be on tape, I'm sorry to hear that from you as the inspiration of the goal, because it is my view that yes, we'll probably never be able, as long as we're at growth state, be able to keep up with housing demand at all levels. But it just appears that in the most recent years, when we had a flood of extra houses, post, in the recession,
And vacancies.
vacancies,
It's been a while.
And then, that started in 07, 08, 09, 10, and 11. And then it's 17, and starting in 12, it kind of started to say, okay, we can tighten this up. and we've now evolved to 2017 that the supply, the number of units that
Shut that off.
I don't mind being taped. The number of units being, are adequate to at least start addressing this fundamental gap. And it's not just homelessness. People talk about homelessness because we're not used to so many tents, if you will. But look at the number of families that literally are paying 50 and 60% of their income to struggle by, and then you add other kinds of issues along with it in terms of transportation, getting to work, and food. You're already in the hole. So I'm here, and I'm editorializing now, but I'm here because I think there is this gap. And I think it's people like you have inspired us to say, we have a goal here. And we need to understand what that means, and we need to frame it that's realistic, okay? And it's not going to be perfect. And then we got to figure out a way to make it move towards progress towards that goal. And it seems like if you look at the raw aggregate numbers vis-a-vis housing, we're not progressing towards that goal, we're regressing from that goal. And that doesn't mean as a growth state you don't always face some of that. So parts of it you understand and you accept. But if the media is correct and all the, not hullabaloo, but the consequences of people being displaced and such like that because there's other people that can afford to keep and rebuild and redo properties, but they do it at a higher level. I mean, the rents are higher. Certain people are served, but others are not. And you used to call yourself a houser, the lead of housers in the state. And it just seems to me, what are we missing and where we are? And ergo, you get the last word. I should have stopped.
Well, we have this famous saying that is rattled around about let's build affordable housing. And when we say the word affordable, what we really mean, and we kind of dodge, is let's have government subsidize the housing we build for people. And that's what we mean when we say let's build affordable housing. And I think people are nervous about saying that because there's resentment by people who've paid for their housing if when they understand, oh, this housing project over here, affordable housing, we taxpayers are paying for all of that, and they sure never paid for anything for me. So people don't want to walk that discussion, but that's in fact what we've got to do if we come anywhere near what you read there, that it's got to be the house has got to be built to equal what the family can support, and that suggests rent rather than construction, but because construction costs a lot more than moving in and renting something, because some other forsucker has paid all the cost on it and just trying to get his money back or her money back.
Well, you say something that's absolutely true there. What's, I think, when I went to school, you started to try and build a calculus to understand a sum of the parts. And the reality is that there are costs, whether it's SDCs or other costs. There are costs, lumber, costs that go into, there's income that could be changed. If people have higher incomes, they can afford more and pay for some of those costs. And then there are regulatory burdens that are costs, if you will.
Water, sewer, electricity.
Processing time, all those kinds of things. So you can cross subsidize. It's not necessarily just to deal with affordable housing. I prefer to think of it as a hybrid. You know, I don't know what you do about income. That's not my arena, if you will, except keeping interest rates low, which effectively provides income. But I mean, that's a cost piece. You've got to make sure that the cost components that go into a house, land, sewer, water, lumber, cabinets, toilets, all of those things, you have to understand what those costs are and the impact over time. And then you have the ability to cross-subsidize those through regulatory enhancements, incentives, and streamlining and the like. So there are ways to cut those things. Well, we will turn this off. But I thank you for your time.